Roger Federer is a billionaire. Forbes made it official earlier this year that he came into the world's billionaires list at $1.1 billion. Bloomberg reckons it's closer to 1.3. He's the second tennis player in the history of the sport to go there, and the first, Iron Trio, who made his money in banking and car dealerships. So honestly, in my opinion, he barely counts. Now here's a number that actually made me want to make this video. Across 24 years on the tennis tour, he had 20 Grand Slams, 103 titles, 310 weeks at world number 1. Roger Federer earned around $130 million in prize money, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but do the maths with me. If he's worth 1.1 billion, then everything he won in 24 years of professional tennis is only roughly 12% of his entire net worth. The man played the greatest career anyone has ever played in the history of the sport, and tennis simply makes up for 12%. So where did the rest of the money come from? And here's the bit that actually gets me. The single most profitable thing that ever happened to Roger Federer was somebody trying to pay him less. Federer's 36 years old. He's been with Nike for almost 24 years, since he was a junior in fact. That's literally an entire generation of tennis fans who've never seen this man wear another logo. And he's not just any Nike athlete. He's one of the most significant ones out of every single athlete they've ever sponsored. When Nike talk about their crown jewels, they're talking about Jordan, LeBron, Tiger, and Roger. That's the literal tier list they've put out. He's also got the RF logo, which if you played tennis in the 2000s, you'll know that the thing was everywhere. It was on shirts, on caps, on bags. It was basically the coat of arms. And in 2019, his contract with Nike was complete. So Nike came to the table, but they wanted to pay him less. Now, I do want to be fair here because from a spreadsheet point of view, I actually do understand it. He's 36, he's had a knee injury. His last major before this was a comeback story that nobody expected to repeat. And a big apparel deal is a bet on the next 5 years, not the last 15 years. And if you're the person at Nike whose job is to allocate that budget towards Federer, you're looking at a player heading towards the end of his career. But the problem is that Nike was valuing a tennis player, and what Federer had actually become was something much bigger than the sport itself. Though he decided to stop, he didn't want to continue his partnership with Nike, and in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you why this was the best financial decision made by any athlete of the century. I'm Ashwin, and this channel is about the business behind tennis, the money, the politics, the stuff that happens off the court that decides what happens on it. If that's your thing, you know what to do. Let's get straight into it. So to understand why Federer leaving Nike was such a big deal, you need to understand how athletes made money before him. Because for over 40 years, there were only ever two ways to do it. The first one was you win things. Prize money, salary, you perform well and you get paid well. It was as simple as that. But in tennis, this is generally brutal because there's no contract. You don't get a guaranteed wage like a footballer or a basketball player or a golfer. If you show up and if you lose in the first round, you go home, whatever the first round pay was guaranteed as, which could be as low as £50,000. The second way is you rent your name out. You could sign up for endorsements, a brand gives you a fee, and you wear their stuff. You do advertisements, and you show up at the thing. But the key word here is rent, because you're renting your face and your personality out by the year. The brand keeps everything they build with it. And the greatest example of this second method is Michael Jordan. So it's the story that most people actually know. 1984, Jordan signs for Nike. It's a 5-year deal. At the time, it's considered enormous. Air Jordan launches the next year, and it doesn't just change the sport, but it changes fashion and shoes forever. And the Jordan brand today is an absolute monster. It does billions a year on its own. And there's a stat I actually really love, and forgive me if the exact figure has moved on, but the Jordan brand generates more annual revenue than the entire WNBA. So take that as you will. And Jordan's earnings from Nike now dwarf what he made playing basketball. His NBA salary across his whole career was somewhere around 90 million. He reportedly makes several times that from Nike every single year, still in 2026. But here's the thing that nobody says about it. Michael Jordan doesn't own the Jordan brand. Nike does. The Jordan brand is just a Nike subsidiary. And what Jordan has is royalty. It is still in fact just rented. If Nike sold the Jordan brand tomorrow for $20 billion, Michael Jordan doesn't get those $20 million. He gets a phone call. To be completely fair to Jordan, however, he did get ownership actually. He bought the Charlotte Hornets in 2010 for around $225 million. He sold his majority stake in 2023 at a roughly $3 billion valuation. That's where the real money is. But notice how he had to leave the sponsorship world entirely and go buy a basketball team to do it. And hold that idea because it matters a lot later on in this video. So that was the ceiling. Be the most marketable athlete alive, and the best outcome is somebody else builds $1 billion brand in your name. And you get a generous slice out of it. And for 40 years, nobody beat that. Nobody even tried to beat that because that's just the way the rules work. Okay, so Federer walks away from Nike, and about 3 weeks later, he turns up at Wimbledon. In 2018, the first round from centre court, and he's wearing Uniqlo. And people genuinely lost their minds at this because it did look wrong. A brand that you associated with Roger Federer for so long, he's not wearing it anymore. You would be kind of confused. It's like seeing someone in the wrong football kit. Just imagine Ronaldo at Barcelona. It wouldn't quite make sense. And this was a deal, reportedly $300 million over a 10-year period. So call it $30 million a year, no matter what happens. So he can retire tomorrow and still get paid, which given he was 36 and Nike had just told him he was worth less, it's a phenomenal negotiation on its own. But that's not the interesting bit. That's just a big number. It doesn't really matter in terms of this conversation. The interesting part is what the deal didn't cover. Uniqlo was a clothing company. That's just simply what they do. They make shirts and shorts and those jackets everyone has. But what they don't make is shoes. So the deal was apparel only: shirts, shorts, jackets, hat, bags, everything from the ankle up, not below. And so that left his feet free. And I want you to sit with how strange this is for a second, because in 2018, Roger Federer, one of the 4 or 5 most commercially valuable athletes on the planet, was walking around with no shoe contract. That is the single most valuable pair of feet in the history of commerce, and they were on the open market for anyone to grab. It does kind of sound weird to say that, but that's just simply how it is. Now, the obvious move here is go to Adidas, Asics, New Balance, get a second check, take the money, and you're done. That's what 99% of athletes will do, because it's the obvious choice. But he didn't do that. Federer, he went out and found a tiny Swiss company that most people out of Zurich had never heard about. Just a quick one before we get back into Switzerland. If you make YouTube videos, I do channel audits. You send me your channel, I go through the titles, thumbnails, the retention graphs, and I come back with a straight list of what you're doing wrong. It's the stuff that you can't really see because you're too close to it, and I've experienced this myself, and someone else looking in is a great help. There's also a one-to-one coaching offer if you want to go much deeper into YouTube and actually level up your game. The link is in the pinned comment and in the description, so check them out. Back in Switzerland. So the story goes that Federer's wife bought a pair of shoes and he tried them on. He liked them and he reached out to the company. The company was called On. They were founded in Zurich in 2010 by a former professional triathlete and 2 co-founders. In 2018, when Federer was shopping around for new sponsorships, they were seen as a serious business, but nowhere near the size of Nike at all. They were a running brand and they had a cult-like following. And if you did see these shoes for the first time, you could kind of notice they were a bit weird, but they definitely had the function. And so Federer goes to them in 2019 and does something that at the time barely anyone noticed. He just buys 3% of the company. So he's just an investor. He puts in some capital and he brings the thing that On generally could not buy at any price, which was credibility. So he works on a product himself. He helps them get into tennis, which is a category they'd never thought they'd even touch. So he effectively becomes a co-founder who just joined 9 years late. So then On goes public on the New York Stock Exchange. The market cap at IPO was around $7 billion. By this year, On's market value has been somewhere in the 15 to 19 billion range, depending on where you look, with revenue heading towards $3.5 billion a year. And with Federer's 3%, puts it between the $300 and $600 million range. Now, I do have to be straight up with you here because I looked properly for this and the exact figures weren't public. On has a dual class share structure that keeps voting control with the founders, so the precise size and value of his holdings isn't really cleanly disclosed. But it's just an accurate estimate on my part. At the low end, let's just do a comparison. His career prize money was $130 million, 24 years, 20 grand slams. We've already been through it. One phone call about a running shoe, $375 million minimum, just like that. The shoe company is worth roughly 3 times his entire tennis career, and he still got it. It's still going up, and he didn't get paid once, but he owns a piece of the thing that keeps growing, whether he gets out of bed or not. So that is the whole video right there. That's the difference between renting your name and owning something. And I want to give him credit for the bit that actually took nerve, because it wasn't the investment, it was the timing. He did this in 2019, not 2022 when he retired. So 2019 when he was still playing, and still ranked in the world's top 5. He still was the most beloved athlete on the planet. And he just spent his brand equity at the exact moment it was worth the most, on a company that hadn't even IPO'd yet, and there was an immense amount of risk going on with that. If he had waited until 2022, he'd been buying shares on the public market like you and me. The same money, but just a fraction of the return. So he sold high on himself while he was still playing. Okay, so now the obvious question is, if this is so clever, why hasn't every other tennis player done the same? And this is the part I actually found the most interesting out of this whole video, because the answer isn't that they're stupid, it's structural. Tennis players are genuinely the worst positioned athletes in professional sport to build wealth. And I'll show you why. There's no team. In football, in basketball, there's a club, and clubs can be bought. Ronaldo's Al Nassr reportedly included a 15% equity stake in the club. LeBron got a piece of Fenway Sports Group, and Michael Jordan bought the Hornets. When your sport has franchises, there's something to own. It's as simple as that. But tennis has no franchises. It's generally the weirdest way a sport can be built, and in my opinion, I think it's the worst. I think something needs to change to improve this, because there's nothing to buy. Wimbledon isn't for sale, the ATP is a members organization, so there's no equity anywhere in the structure of the whole sport. And there's not even a salary. Footballers get paid whether they play or not. Benchwarmers can be paid tens of thousands a week, whether they play or not. Tennis players get paid when they win, and it's the purest form of eat what you kill in a professional sport. There's also no revenue share. If the tournament makes more money, you don't automatically get a cut of it. And you're a sole trader. So you pay your own coach, your own physio, your own flight, 11 months of a year, 30 countries, while you live out of a bag. And it's the longest season any sport has. 11 months a year is insanely crazy. And for players ranked below the world top 100, I can't imagine how much stress they go through per year. So try building a business from a hotel room in a different time zone every week. It's literally impossible. So the only route available for a tennis player is build a personal brand big enough that companies outside tennis want a piece of it, and then convert that brand into ownership instead of cash. Federer is the only player who's ever completed that sequence. And look at the numbers on everyone else. Novak Djokovic, 24 Grand Slams, the most in history, around $240 million. Nadal, 22 Grand Slams, around $220 million. Federer, 20 Grand Slams, the least out of the big three, and he's worth $1.1 billion. Nadal has got more Grand Slams than Federer, but he's worth roughly a fifth of his entire net worth. It's not really a fame gap or a talent gap. It's the structure of tennis that's the problem. It's as simple as that. Nadal has built real things like the academy in Mallorca, property, proper businesses, and Djokovic has restaurants. He's put money into biotech. So these aren't financially naive men. And Djokovic actually was an investment partner is now a partner at an investment bank in America. There's also one more thing, and I think it's underrated, because Federer's other advantage was 20 years of never ever putting a foot wrong. He had no scandals, no bad interviews, just absolutely nothing wrong. One analyst also described him as completely scandal-free, a man who simply never says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing. And that's just a level of trust that you get to build with your consumers. And that's why he's so trustworthy. And that's exactly why brands value him at such a high level. At least it's one of the parts of it. So, the two men currently running the sport, Alcaraz and Sinner. And commercially, they're the biggest thing tennis has ever had since Federer. Alcaraz has the charisma and global reach. Sinner has Italy and a level on the court dominance we haven't seen since Djokovic's peak. Both have very large endorsement portfolios already, but here's the actual question, and it's not about how much are they earning, that's literally not the point. It's about, are they taking cash or are they taking equity? It's like taking the short-term deal or the long-term deal, and in the end, the long-term, the equity, is going to play a much bigger part in their net worth as a player. Because the template is public now. Everyone knows what Federer did. LeBron has taken equity over fees for decades. Ronaldo gets a piece of his own club. The generation coming through now walks into meetings asking for a piece of a company rather than straight cash. So in one sense, yes. Obviously, the equity model is the default now. That fight's over. Federer won it. But I'd flag two things before we decide it's so easy. The first one, the window was the hard part, not the idea. Taking equity now is obvious. Finding a $15 billion company when it's a small Swiss running brand is simply not obvious. That's the hardest part of it. And the second one is you have to be worth having. On didn't hand Federer 3% because he asked nicely. They did it because 2 decades of him being flawless in public was worth more to them than the cash. That part cannot simply be structured. It has to be earned slowly over an entire career by not doing the stupid thing every single time when it's available. So when Nike sat down in 2018 and decided Roger Federer was worth less money, they weren't wrong about the tennis player himself. He was 36, the end of his career. He maybe had about 4 years left. That was a reasonable call on their part. But they were just valuing the wrong asset because Federer has 2 parts to himself: the player and then the commercial asset. The commercial asset was the one that they were misvaluing because he wasn't simply a tennis player anymore. There was a brand and a person attached to itself. And the moment somebody puts a price on that which he didn't agree with, he went and found somewhere to spend it where it would actually pay him back. 20 Grand Slams made him famous, but 1 pair of unsigned feet made him $1 billion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It would mean so much if you liked and subscribed, and tell me what you think of it in the comments. And who do you think out of Alcaraz or Sinner could one day live up to Federer's peak, if at all? And also, definitely go check out the channel audits and the one-to-one coaching in the pinned comments or the description. If you're a YouTuber, it will help you out a ton.